Good evening, everyone. I think we are a little late and very sorry for these technical discrepancies. So we are really delighted to have with us our respected panelist. And the topic of today's panel discussion is the future of clinical trials in India, integrating innovation, inclusivity, and ethical rigors. So we have with us Professor Santanu Kumar Tripathi. He is the president of Association of Clinical Pharmacologists and ex-head at the Department of Clinical Pharmacology, School of Tropical Medicine, Kolkata. We have with us Dr. Nandini Kumar. She is president of FERCI and also ex-deputy director of General Senior Grade at ICMR. We are also delighted to have with us Dr. Sreenivasa Murthy L. He is also a very senior physician and clinical researcher. He is the vice president of RSSDI, and currently he is attached with Life Care Clinic and Research Center at Bangalore. We have with us Dr. Santosh Taur, Director of Medical Affairs, Vaccines and Digital at Pfizer Limited, Mumbai. We also have with us Mrs. Priyanka Bose Bhattacharya, head at the Department of Medical and Clinical Governance and Process at Abbott Healthcare Private Limited. We also have with us Dr. Anirban Rai Chaudhary, Associate Vice President and Head at Development Center of Excellence, Sun Pharma. On behalf of PRF West Bengal branch and API West Bengal branch, FERCI, IPS, and Association of Clinical Pharmacologists, I welcome you all in this panel discussion. So I had shared one slides with Clarnet team. May I request the organizer to please share the screen for our delegates who are attending today. I think almost now it is showing around 540, 542, like that. Really thankful to all of you who are there from 2 p.m. today. Today, we will try to cover this broad agenda. Number one, how we can implement innovations in clinical trials. It could be artificial intelligence, medical devices. What should be our inclusive research design, especially when we talk about underrepresented societies like older adults, rural people, tribal people, women, vulnerable population? What are the different ethical rigor and evolving regulations in Indian clinical research? Operationalizing recent CRO registration regulations and their implications, and overall role of sponsors, regulators, and clinicians in sustaining participant trust. So, as there is, I'm sorry the slides are not being shown, but may I go through the important landmark? As already we had discussed, the International Clinical Trial Day.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Hello. Sorry for disturbing, sir. Sir, just give me
You
2 minutes.
got my
Yes, sir. I'm sharing the screen. Just give me 2 minutes.
But Shambo, you can go on, I think. You can go on meanwhile.
So I think we can go on. So we know about the story of HMS Salisbury, the 12 sick sailors who were divided into 6 pairs. Then ultimately what we got, that 2 oranges and lemon, that works. And from 1747, that results ultimately translated into their regulations. 1795, British made citrus compulsory in the diet of sailors. Now, when we talk about few important achievement by which after this Lind's treatise of the scurvy we got, first of all, all subjects were in similar condition. So like was compared with like. We know the importance of controlling the variables. But as we are talking about from 1747 to 1795, long time it took. Why? Because they thought they will make that perishability of the fruit and expense, they make it inspissated juice. So ultimately what happened? The vitamin C was not there. So there was some confusion. And I think with all clinical trials, we have certain confusions. And for that, we need to find out the answers. We need to do further research. And there were previous documentation that was being missed. Maybe during the Vasco da Gama and Hawkins, they had mentioned about the importance of oranges and lemons. So again, it re-emphasized the review of literature, previous documentation, which matters. And after this important study, another area we had explored, how to distill fresh water from seawater. So again, that had emphasized the importance of occupational health, and we got something called as secondary outcomes from a research. So in that perspective, I think the ICTD is something very important. You can move forward to the next slides, please. We had already introduced our respected panelists. Next, these are the themes. Next. Yeah, this is the famous book, The Treatise of Scurvy. Next. And we had discussed this ICTD. For that, we are celebrating 20th of May. Yes, next, please. Next. I think this slide is again very important for those who are postgraduate students, because often we use this terminology, clinical trial and observational studies together. First of all, we need to understand as investigator whether I am assigning the exposures. If the answer is yes, it is experimental study. And that is randomized control trial or non-randomized control trials. So if we talk about clinical trials, then we need to decide whether as an investigator, I am assigning the exposure. If it is not, then it is an observational study. This is a very simple rule. If as an investigator, I am not assigning the exposure to the patient or participant, then that is an observational study. Next slide, please. Next. So if we talk about the experimental studies or the clinical trials in India, we need to have a thorough knowledge about this document, that is New Drug Clinical Trial Rules 2019, and there are certain updates. Next, when we talk about observational studies, this ICMR guideline is there to help us. There are certain overlap between these two documents that we can discuss. Next slide, please. And this should be the first statement we need to understand when we talk about different key stakeholders in clinical trials. We do research for the pupil, and that should be with the pupil. So there should not be on the pupil like behavior. Next, please. We have with us now Dr. Nandini Kumar, who is a renowned ethicist attached with multiple ethics committees, and currently Madam is President of FERCI. Madam, I have two questions for you. First, with increasing inclusion of vulnerable populations, it could be terminally ill patient or cognitively impaired patient, how do you see ethics committee navigating proxy consent and distributive justice, especially in community-based studies?
So before beginning, I once again want to thank you for including me in this panel. In fact, in the ICMR guidelines of 2017, we have a section on vulnerable group. And when this was actually being designed by the committee for that particular section, there were 3 A4 size papers where these vulnerable groups were actually described. But you can't use that list in the ICMR guidelines. So with great difficulty, actually, I condensed it, trying to see that I do not leave any any vulnerable group as such and shortened it and saw that it was inclusive of all types of vulnerable population that we have. In fact, I always say that any research participant for that matter is vulnerable. It's only about the relativity. One may be less vulnerable than another. So, for example, in in a cancer institution, stage 1, a person suffering from stage 1 will be less vulnerable compared to a patient suffering from stage 4. So it's a relativity which is very, very important. And the ethics committee's duty is to see that their interests are protected. How can you actually protect that? The most important aspect is the informed consent. Most of them will not be either, their situation would be such that they will not be free enough to say no. And this situation could be varying for various reasons. They may be, age-wise, children, they are dependent on their parents. And older people, they are dependent on their children. And we heard a lot about the geriatric population in the previous talk. And it reflects a lot on me also because I have also entered that group now. And I very much feel that if there is a trial where I can be included, I will very gladly be part of that. But if you actually consider my vulnerability, I'm not as vulnerable as another person who may not have such knowledge or awareness or may be dependent on his household, other mates or circumstances. Think about the institutionalized inmates, whether they are children or widows. We have such a facility in our country for widows. And also old, the senior groups in, being left in institutions to fend for themselves. They're all, people who cannot give their consent, like wholly understanding the situation. So who will actually speak for them or be responsible for them? And they are called actually legally authorized or legally acceptable representatives. That's the term we have put in the guidelines, because in some countries they talk about legally acceptable representative. But when we talk about legally authorized representative, it means the parents or the legal custodian. So when a disabled person is there who cannot understand the nuances of whatever you are talking, another person has to come and help. And that person could be anybody, parents or legal custodian. If not, could be grandfather, uncle, aunt, or caretaker. And when you are talking about institutionalized people, then it will be the head of the institution responsible for that. So they have to take care of that. And two things that we have to consider when talking about vulnerable groups is include them only if that research addresses their problem. Or the other side is, if a vulnerable person satisfies the inclusion criteria, that person has every right to be included in the study. Just imagine, say, a 16-year-old child in the school suffering from melanoma, coming from a lower socioeconomic group. Now, if there is a trial site somewhere near where she can actually go to that unit and get treatment, test, drug, is it not okay if she goes there? Would you actually try to say that, oh, you come from a lower socioeconomic group, we don't want to include you because tomorrow people will question us? That's not the way things have to be seen. one has to see whether they actually satisfy the inclusion criteria, and that you are not forcing them to enroll in the study. There'll be other forces. So the ethics committee will actually watch out for that. Another way of protecting them would be, ethics committee would say that there has to be monitoring. And that monitoring can be off-site or on-site. Off-site means you get the progress reports, etc., etc. And especially if there is more risk, you will ask for progress reports at a shorter interval instead of waiting for 1 year. Generally, we wait for 1 year. So you'll ask for 3 monthly or 6 monthly. And during COVID times, there were even requests for 1 weekly report. So it depends on the type of risk that they would be subjected to. So that is the monitoring. And also you can take an active role. You means the ethics committee can take an active role in visiting the site. Suppose this is an institution, then you can go and see for yourself how things are. So, and if it's a community, you can visit that community. And this community doesn't mean that it's a group in a village. Community can mean anything. It's, for example, a community having similar disease, that is also a community. So community is a very broad-based term. So that's my take on the protection to be offered to the vulnerable groups by the ethics committees.
Thank you, madam. So you tell us how ethics committee should become a more proactive rather than only reactive. So now moving towards the next part of the question, next question actually. If we talk about ICMR guideline and their implications on different Indian ethics committees, now we are talking about artificial intelligence era. So how ethics committees evolve to evaluate multicentric artificial intelligence led trials where explainability of risk is limited?
Actually, a very complicated question as such, because multicentric trial itself is a topic by itself. And when you add AI to that, it becomes even more complicated. First of all, when you have multicentric trials, let's just simplify that first. When you have multicentric trial within our country, then one needs to actually identify one particular ethics committee as the designated ethics committee. This actually is not in the AI guidelines of ICMR, but it is there in the 2017 guidelines. So then you have a separate guideline also on multicentric trials by ICMR. So the point is that this designated ethics committee will take inputs from all the site ethics committees and make the master plan. And once the thing is finalized with the inputs, then it is actually sent to all the site ECs. Now it is up to the site ECs to either accept it as such, or technically they want to actually have more rigorous control. Then they can say that, okay, in their SOP, if they describe that if this such a thing comes, it will go through expedited review. So in the expedited review SOP, you will have to add that. Now that is about multicentric trials. Now when it comes to AI, it is slightly different in the sense about the expertise in the ethics committee. So not all of us are, AI trained or anything like that. So even I used to actually avoid, learning more about AI. I used to run away from that, but there's no other go. You have to face it. And I've started facing it. So what the ICMR guidelines say is that in the ethics committee, we have the legal expert. but you have to choose a legal expert who is conversant with IT and also has done medical law. How medical law is going to help in AI, I don't know. Medical law as such would be an additional qualification. And then you have to have data scientists in the group. You have to have computer scientists with AI knowledge. So subject experts, of course. So either it's not written co-opt, but you can co-opt. But our guidelines as well as the regulations of the country say don't go beyond 15, number 15, 7 to 15. So you adjust that way, have these experts. That's the specialty about the EC structure. Now, not everyone can understand AI, so you will have to give them some training. This is only for those ECs which is actually going to review the AI trials. So I mean AI associated, I would say, trials. So this training should be in big data, Internet of Things, and also about how data collection procedures should be. It should also be told about the importance of getting progress reports, monitoring. The type of review that will happen will be the same as for the other types of research that we talk of, like exemption, expedited, and full committee review. That depends on the type of risk that is involved in the study. So there are many other things. Main thing is that, when you are collaborating in a multicentric trial, you have to be very careful that you are all on equal footing. I mean, the centers are all on equal footing except for the designated EC, which has more responsibility, overall responsibility. But the site ECs will be responsible for their site conducting the trial. Conflict of interest is very, very important in that. Biological and data transfer has to take care of data sharing, data security, and whatever regulations are there. In our country, actually, there are no specific regulations as such, but the Niti Aayog also brought out, just let me see that. Well, I'm not getting that, where it has gone.
I think we have now the DPDP Act also.
DPDP is there, but yeah, the Niti Aayog actually has brought out principles of AIs, like safety, inclusivity, privacy, and accountability. Then we also have National Digital Health Mission talking about reliability and safety, data handling, patient consent, valid data, and the use of AI tools. This is very important because the AI tools that you are using should come from a very authentic source. Earlier, we heard about, the manufacturers who are not even registered or who don't get the CDSCO approval actually offer to have the diagnostic tests done. Similarly, about these AI trials, you have the supervised, semi-supervised, and non-supervised, adaptations. So you have to actually see whether these are supervised ones. And that means some sort of standardized methodology would have been used. The data collection, what data got fed into creating that algorithm, that is very, very important, because otherwise it can lead to false data. And who do you include it has to be, you cannot exclude certain groups. So you will not get a proper conclusion because of that. And not only that, when you are using AI, the tools can malfunction. So you need to have a lot of monitoring from that point of view, quality control of that. The ICMR guidelines talks about 10 things that have to be actually seen. That is about autonomy, that of course that brings in consent, safety and risk minimization, trustworthiness, data privacy, accountability and liability, optimization of data quality, accessibility, equity and inclusiveness, collaboration, non-discrimination, validity are the 10 points. I will not elaborate on each point because it will go beyond time. So for the time being, I think probably.
Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you, madam. I think one of the very key take-home message, whatever you had tell us from that would be artificial intelligence may be borderless, but ethical accountability is not. So ethics committees must upgrade. We are now protocol reviewers only, but also we have some capability now from the ethics committee perspective that we could be an algorithm. There are different algorithms we know. So algorithm interpreters and data protection, data privacy and that protectors also. So I think we should have artificial intelligence specialist in our ethics committee. That is what Madam emphasized. Now, please go to the next slide. Yeah, so we have with us a renowned clinician of this country, and he is a very reputed clinical researcher, Dr. Sreenivasa Murthy from Bangalore. So I have two questions again for you, sir. So number one, from your clinical trial experience, how do we balance clinical judgment with protocol constraints when trial participants present with different comorbidities? For an example, diabetes, cardiovascular disease patients, or it could be infections also.
Thank you, Shambo. I'm literally honored to be present among so many stalwarts in the field of clinical trials, and happy Clinical Trials Day to everybody. And Shambu's question is very apt because in many cases, the protocol does not define what do you do when you have a certain condition. So it falls down to investigators' discretion. So very commonly, the problem is shifted to investigators' shoulders. That is where we end up in trouble, and that is the time we need to use our clinical acumen. I think that is something which most of us lack in our routine clinical practice, that forgetting about the clinical acumen and correlating, because end of the day, it is the patient's safety what we should look at. And that we tend to compromise. For example, there can be a deviation in one of the trials. The NT-proBNP was to be done only when there is a suspected case of heart failure. And the tubes containing the lab kits add a tube for NT-proBNP by default. So all the centers started performing NT-proBNP without checking for the heart failure signs and symptoms. So that becomes a protocol deviation. And this happened across the sites. So the problem now is that we have all taken protocol deviation, informed the ethics committees, but how do we go about because some of the patients in that subjects in that study had an NT-proBNP raised. So the PI went on to do a echocardiogram, proved that, and some of them they've treated with an anti-failure medicine. Now the dilemma is whether it was right or wrong. As per protocol, it was absolutely wrong because we used the tubes which was not meant to be used for that visit until unless there was a signs and symptoms of heart failure. So this is the confusion we face. So, but the PI's argument was that I have taken care of the safety of the patient. Yes, it is a mistake, deviation. Patient was asymptomatic, but the NT-proBNP was very high. So that is where we lie. So that thin line, there is always a gray zone end of the day, as PIs, it's our responsibility to take care of our patients' health. So we should not hesitate to deviate protocols at certain times. And of course, keeping the ethics committee in the loop always, and keeping the sponsor or the people who are responsible for that. So it's very important for us to take a call. And a lot of times, for example, right now we're doing a repatriation trial, which is a triple G, lot of diarrheas are seen. So I had to go back and read the investigator's brochure to safeguard my patients for the patient retention. Because imagine a person having 4 or 5 diarrheas per day may not continue in the study, right? So I need to look at that as a responsibility as a PI. I need to look at the safety of the patient and how often all these happen, because that is a new molecule for me. I have not used it in my clinical practice. First time I am also getting exposed to the molecule. So how do you tackle that? How do you retain the patient? So the comorbidities, the patient's condition, clinical acumen is very, very important. The safety of the patient, as any person says, like in the FDA, the first thing they look at is the safety of the patient. For example, one of the FDA inspections I faced, the primary reason why they came into was there was a blinded CGM, which was double blinded, not to the patient, not to the investigator. So they released the CGM data post closure of the study. Okay, so they were saying it is to avoid the bias, which even the inspector was not very convinced. But once they released, we know patient had about 50-60 hypoglycemias, which was not picked up by your glucometer. So that was one of the signaling why they came for inspection to the site. That was an approval trial for long-acting insulin, and that is how they pick up signals. So it is very important that we report. And of course, now in India, of course, we have definitely upgraded ourselves. We are very upfront. We are through the world that we are doing a lot of ethical business now, and there is no unethical business in our country. And especially the ethical committees have become more stringent, more proactive. In fact, I wanted to ask Madam about the virtual meetings of ethics committee should be approved. Because physical meeting, the post-COVID especially, we need to have that. So we have put it in the SOP that saying that some of the meetings can be virtual. It is not that every meeting can be virtual. Some of the meetings they have to allow, and they put it in the EC SOP. So the ethical committees, when there is a minor amendments, can meet up. So that is where the AI comes into picture in the clinical trial. And one of the suggestions I made in one of the insulin titration, there is a basal bolus versus a long-acting insulin comparator. In the basal bolus, there are a lot of hypoglycemia seen, and we don't get a pop-up. So every day we need to titrate 5-6 patients in the iPad, and the patients are given a Bluetooth enabled and with a SIM card, the glucometer. So as soon as they check, it comes to our iPad. But the iPad I'm not keeping with me 24/7. So when somebody thinks that 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. when I'm in OPD, I may not see that. So one of the artificial things that the AI part, what I was recommending, and which is being implemented by one of the sponsors, is that it should give me a SMS kind of a sound, or a WhatsApp kind of a sound that there is something wrong. So I go to the iPad and see. So that is where I think we should use this artificial intelligence, all that, to have a safeguard of the patient, to increase the safety of the patient, our subjects. And LAR rightly said by Madam that the LARs are the most vulnerable population, which are used or misused by many of the PA, which is a saddening part. Because, for example, a vegetable vendor on the roadside is parents. He cannot manage. So if you say a free drug, and I have heard in one of the forums that one of the doctors says, like the cancer medicine is like a boon, some few lakhs you are getting free, so you enroll. That is not the way we are supposed to do that, ethically, right? So these are some of the gray zones and some blunt mistakes people tend to do for retention's sake. That is bad.
Absolutely. So as clinical researcher or clinical trialist, you are wearing the two hats. So two hat conflict is also an important area we need to address. And for that, I think if you also can share your real world experience where trial inclusion and exclusion criteria excluded a population you clinically thought should benefit, but due to that stringent inclusion and exclusion criteria, you have to remove that population. So
True.
How can this also be addressed?
So it is very difficult to address or sort it out, because when a new protocol comes, obviously when I'm seeing my OPD, I will be thinking about the inclusion exclusion criteria of a patient sitting in front of me. But again, I will assess his educational status. For example, in my SOP, there's no LAR. I don't take any uneducated in any of my trials because that bias itself goes up. Because see, the LAR issue is that there has to be a witness there. And who is the witness again? Now, how do you define the witness? The witness also can be biased. If I take my nurse as my witness, obviously she is my employee or my receptionist or somebody sitting outside is my patient. So I can ask him, he's a neutral person. But again, there I get biased. So that should not happen. So that is why I have made it a SOP that there is no uneducated or LAR used in my consent. And it's all AV consent now for phase 2, phase 3 as we know. So when patient is sitting in front of me, I would definitely think about the inclusion exclusion of a given study, whichever the recruitment is going on. So that is the stage where you tend to think, and it is not a bias, it is putting them upfront that there is an option other than your OPD treatment which is going on. If you are willing, I would like to explain. So many of patients, 80% of them say, yes, we are interested, they will listen. And 90% of them say no. That is the most difficult task. And thanks to our media and our other inverted commas friends who talk nonsense about clinical trials. I'm sorry to use those words, but they say you have been experimented, you've been exploited, all that, wherein it is an audiovisual consenting and they have to write, read, and then take a call. For example, in my OPD, I give them a consent form, to make a small note of it that so-and-so version has been handed over to the subject. If he's interested, I'll ask him to come back. If he's not interested, just return the ICF to the reception and again document such and such a patient has been returned. 90% of the cases. So I offer definitely when there is a, for example, there is a obese and comorbidities, there is a dual and triple agonist a trial going on. So I will offer them. There is nothing wrong because now, you know, the dual agonist is already in the market in India. So those are the, like tirzepatide I'm talking about, and we have done trials. Sarmount to we were part of only 2 centers in India did that, and we were part of that trial. So that is where the question comes that wearing 2 hats is actually a blessing in disguise or advantages, I would say, because every in and day in and day out, you're doing the same. And you tend to identify subjects. And that's one of the reasons why I face the FDA inspections more frequently, because in most trials, I'm the global highest recruiter. So that is where one of the signals for the highest recruiters, you tend to face the FDA inspections repeatedly.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sreenivasa Murthy. I think we can conclude from your saying that balancing clinical intuition with scientific rigor, it is not a compromise. It is the cornerstone of ethical, inclusive, and impactful clinical trials. I think with that, may I move towards the next slide, please? Yeah, so we have with us a very renowned clinical pharmacologist, Dr. Santosh Taur. Currently, Dr. Taur is in the Pfizer as in the medical affairs and digital team. So we are really delighted to have you. So my first question to you, in a post-pandemic India, how is industry integrating digital health tools and decentralized trial models in alignment with Indian regulation?
Thanks, Shambo. I think this is quite insightful conversation. Am I coming through clearly?
Yes, yes.
Superb. So I think India has seen a significant revolution with regards to the conduct of the clinical trials. While we still hope that there could be a faster pace of the revolution also happening towards the regulatory framework, and that's also taking its own pace, and which is also in more the positive manner. I would like to highlight that while we all talk about decentralized clinical trials, and we know it is a complete spectrum. On extreme right-hand side, we have fully centralized clinical trial, which is our traditional mode of conducting clinical trial. And then we have extreme left-hand side, where we have fully decentralized clinical trial, where most of us haven't reached there. Okay, because in the current construct, we know that there are certain elements that still requires human touch. And that's the reason we are somewhere between the 2 spectra. Okay, that's called a hybrid. So we have certain components of the traditional clinical trial where the first visit happens at the site, and maybe certain subsequent monitoring visit may happen at the remote site or at the home care facility. So we are still, I think, hovering around this hybrid spectrum. And now I think there's steady movement towards the fully decentralized clinical trial. Now, what model is working? COVID has accelerated decentralization of clinical trials. However, it was not the period of genesis of decentralization clinical trial. I remember like Pfizer was the first to have investigational new drug approval for any clinical trial, which was approved way back in 2011, which was our remote study. It was research on electronic monitoring of overactive bladder treatment experiences, which was used for the this condition. And then we had different components, right, from e-consent, e-monitoring. All these were first time used in the IND approved, FDA approved clinical trial design. And thereon, I think we have seen a lot of clinical trials, and there were many examples before also. And there were few companies who did trials with certain components of digital technology, which were used at different aspects of the patient journey. So what we have seen in the journey is that the decentralization of clinical trial can happen at multiple places. One biggest area is uh, the patients need to visit the site. Okay, and that will depend on complexity of procedure. Okay, there are certain procedures which are less complex, like your vital monitoring, your electrocardiograms, or sometimes there are less complex procedures such as injections. We don't have to visit the actual clinical trial site for that. And that's why we call something called as like how do we reach the last mile, wherein we use the local healthcare facilities. Like we have many community health centers. Okay, we have the hospitals. Okay, how can we use them? Second concept is the mobile health technology. Now we see a lot of mobile health reaching the patients and the participants home. So can we use those mobile health units, which are called as mobile research units? So you have the satellite centers in addition to your main clinical trial center. And third is reaching the last millimeter, not the mile, millimeter, where we have home-based nursing. Okay, home nursing in clinical trial, HNCT, where some of the services, including lab investigation, certain monitoring, can be conducted in the comfort of someone's home. Okay, that's about the clinical site related activity. Then the second most important component is about the assessment of the endpoints. And we have seen that eDiary has been increasingly used. And we have clinical outcome assessment, which is further divided by various regulatory authorities into uh, PROs. And now we have the electronic counterpart for it, patient reported outcome, EPROs, EPROs. We also have PERF outcomes. Okay, we have clinician reported outcomes. We have observer reported outcome. And all these outcomes can be converted into electronic components. In fact, now we also see digital biomarkers. So there are certain biomarkers which have been digital markers which have been validated by the health authorities. And we have seen many examples of these for atrial fibrillation studies. There are many studies like Apple Heart Watch, Fitbit Heart Study, and now these have been approved by US FDA. Okay, and these biomarkers are increasingly used in the clinical trial. So definitely, I think we are seeing significant improvement there. And third important component which I want to highlight is the patient recruitment. And we heard recently Sreenivasa talking about how the unethical practices may happen. And there are good data which show that conventional recruitment methodologies, they lead to delay in recruitment at 35% of investigational sites and more than 80% of trials exceeding their enrollment timeline. And now what we have seen when we apply different elements of decentralized clinical trial monitoring, the overall development can be brought down. And this is proven that in 2019, we saw that it used to take on an average 8.6 years. But in 2022, it came down to 4.8 years. So this shows that if you use multiple digital methodology, including digital and social media platform for patient recruitment, it will lead to much faster patient recruitment. And how does it culminate into? Everything that we do will lead to faster completion of clinical trial and eventually better and faster access to these innovative medicines, biologics to patients. Yeah.
Great. So I think what you had discussed just now, we we can understand the future of clinical trials in India will not be built in hospital corridors alone. It will be co-created through three C's. One, cloud platforms. Two, community homes. And three, connected devices, with regulation working in step, not behind. So with that, I want to ask you the second question here. In cases where digital innovations in clinical trials encountered regulatory hesitations or resistance, what proactive strategies, such as integrating real-world data or hybrid trial designs, can be employed to align innovation with regulatory expectations?
This is a very important consideration, and I must appreciate India did its part much before even pandemic. We had our EHR guidance released in 2016. We had our telemedicine guidance, which was released immediately after COVID pandemic in 2020. While that time it excluded clinical research, clinical trial, and we are hopeful that we would have certain components of telehealth, telemedicine, which will also address a clinical trial. Because that time the requirement was more to deliver healthcare to patient doorsteps. And that's the reason the regulatory guidance was more focused on the telemedicine part. Now we have to see with the advancement in decentralization of clinical trial, how we transition from telemedicine to telehealth and also expand the scope of these regulations to include clinical trial. And I'm happy to see that now DPDP would cover certain elements of this. Okay. And that's where this regulatory advancement will help all the stakeholders, sponsors, academicians, patient advocacy groups, all technology experts. Okay. And that's where I think Nandini ma'am spoke about. We need AI experts. Just to give you example, like when we spoke about digital innovation, it can be bucketed under three elements of the clinical research journey. First element I spoke about is the patient recruitment and retention. Okay, we need to have ethics as well as regulatory guidance on that. How social media and digital tools can be used ethically to accelerate patient recruitments. Okay, second bucket is for recording of the outcomes, where I spoke about use of wearable devices, use of remote monitoring devices, use of lot of your electronic assessment like ECOAs, EPROs, and all those. Can we have certain guidance framework around this? What are the standardization methods? Okay, and we with Make in India thing, we see a lot of Indian partners, they're coming forward and developing these tools. We have no homegrown tools available. We don't have to rely on imported tools. Now, how do you foster this environment and create the framework? We should build confidence on these homegrown tools. That's the second part. And third part is how do we use digital for analytics? And that's where I'm gonna say until artificial intelligence co-powered by human intelligence. You cannot leave everything to AI. It has to have component of human intelligence. But how AI can be increasingly used? Just to give beautiful example from Pfizer's history of COVID development, both vaccines and antiviral. I think it's available in public domain. We have seen that use of AI for different aspects such as monitoring, target identification, discovery, also predicting the efficacy. We found that the screening of our antiviral came down from 6 million targets to 600 targets. And that reduced our screening time from 4 years to 4 months. Imagine, thing which would have traditionally by high throughput screening would have taken us 4 years. With the help of AI, it took us just 4 months. And with generative AI coming in, now we also use it for various regulatory reporting. And that brought down timeline for development of these regulatory guidance, regulatory submissions by 50%. Okay, which led to faster submission of various documents and faster approval and faster access to patients during the time when we all were looking up to these new innovations. And that's the beauty of AI. And but it comes with its own set of challenges: ethical AI, privacy, confidentiality, safety, generalizability, interoperability. And how do we build that confidence? And that can only happen when we have regulatory framework which will help us. See, so I'm part of Indian Society for Clinical Research, and we came up with this beautiful position paper on decentralized clinical trial. I think those who in the audience who are interested can refer to the ICR position paper on DCT, published in 2022. It's available on the website of the Indian Society for Clinical Research, ICR. And that has given very beautiful narrative of what was the pretext, what decentralized components are there, what needs to be done in future. So while we wait for similar amendment in our regulatory guideline, NDCT Rule 2019 will be amended in due course. ICMR has already started the process. Okay, so we will see more coming in the near future, but we don't have to wait for it. We have some guidances from nearby countries, developed countries like FDA, AMR. We can rely on those guidances as the best practice rather than just saying we don't have guidance and generally do anything that pleases us. They do what is ethically right, what is responsible, and that will lead to better use of the uh, uh, digital technology. Now, quickly switching gear to real world data. Now we see that real world data is not only for post marketing as per our earlier assumption. Okay, now we see real world data being increasingly used right at the discovery stage, early development, phase 1, phase 2, to accelerate trial feasibility. We have single arm trial where we don't need two arms to conduct the trial. We have single investigational arm, and then we use real world arm either from the registries or from some other trial pool. So that arm works like your synthetic control arm. And these interventions have reduced both timeline as well as cost of the development. And that's the reason we have such complex designs now. Clinical trial designs are already complex. We moved from traditional RCT to adaptive designs to minimal designs to now we also have these hybrid designs where we have component of real world also incorporated. And that's the reason we need equally fast-paced amendment to our regulatory guidance, and that will build more confidence to the investigators and the sponsors. Yeah.
Great. I think what I can conclude from your expert comment that regulatory frictions should not halt innovation. It should sharpen it. And when we talk about real world data and hybrid models, those who are woven into compliance, we move from resistance to resilience. So we need digital transformation in trials. And you had beautifully explained how we should collaborate, how we should become adaptive, and then regulatory modernization is also required. So thank you, Dr. Taur, for your wonderful insights. And now
Thanks,
we
Shambo.
move towards the next slides. Yeah, so Tripathi sir, are you there, sir? Can you hear us, Professor Santanu Kumar Tripathi sir?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, sir. Sir, can you please open your video so that we can see you also, sir? So, welcome, Professor Santanu Kumar Tripathi. We all know we had already introduced Professor Santanu Tripathi, sir, who is the president of Association of Clinical Pharmacologists, and he is a very senior clinical pharmacologist in this country, academic leader. So, sir, my first question to you, as a senior clinical pharmacologist, we are talking too much about artificial intelligence, but that is the requirement of this time only. So how do you see artificial intelligence driven drug development and trial optimization aligning with the ethical imperative of ensuring patient safety in our country? Sir, can you hear us?
Hello?
Yeah.
Come on. Can you repeat, please? No, I had a problem.
No, I had asked Professor Tripathi.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Sir, can you hear us?
Yes.
So can you hear us the first question, or shall I repeat, sir?
I could, and also it will be screen on the screen. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there has been a lot of discussion already regarding the use of AI or AI-driven drug development and trial optimization. There is definitely need for trial optimization. The use of AI in discovery and also in the different development phase has started in different parts of the world. Of course, in India, we are trying to adapt ourselves, as has been evidenced by the response given by the ICMR. ICMR has already developed research ethics guidelines where AI is being used. But so far as the regulations are concerned, truly speaking, yes, the sensitization is taking place currently, but it has not yet been incorporated in the NDCT rules. Necessary amendments are yet to be made. My previous speaker, Dr. Santosh Taur, has also mentioned that. We are waiting for that, but we are at the threshold of accepting, integrating use of AI technologies into our regulatory system, as well as implementation of the clinical trial projects with help from the AI technologies. The concern is, as of now, if the protocol usually so far as the data collection, so far as the AI can really help in different layers and different levels of clinical trial conduct, starting from development of the protocol to the different stages of conduct of clinical trial, starting from screening of patients, enrollment of patients, to the informed consent process, and the data collection, patient monitoring, off-site patient monitoring, etc., at all stages. Now, in any clinical trial project, if we think of the situation in India currently, if the sponsor very categorically mentions the indispensability of AI, use of AI technologies in the clinical trial implementation, in the protocol itself, when they are submitting with the regulator, then perhaps there might be a lot of back and forth communications should be needed. And because truly speaking, in our regulations, no clear rules have been yet framed. So there might be some kind of confusion and some kind of back and forth explanation to be sought from the sponsor. But then again, if you think of that, at the implementation stage, the sponsor decides that certain aspects of management, trial management in the whole ecosystem, clinical trial ecosystem, they will be taking help of some of the AI technologies. So for that matter, I think they have to win the confidence of the local ethics committee. And it is again depends on the specific institutional ethics committee how comfortable they are to handle it. And to a certain extent, I think the first panelist, Dr. Nandini Kumar, has also touched upon that it all requires that the necessary capacity building among all the stakeholders, and the ethics committee is also not an exception. So as of now, the ethics committee constitution in our country, whether it is the prescription from the ICMR guideline or in the NDCT rules, right now there is nobody who can be considered as an expert in this area. But then again, ethics committee has been given the flexibility that as needed, as they feel appropriate, then the ethics committee can always call for a subject expert. And for that matter, the use of AI technologies and to what extent it impacts on the patient safety, impacts on the patient's, impacts on data privacy, all these issues, ethical issues. So there certainly, in order to be more informed how AI is going to impact on these issues particularly, the experts can be okay. So the experts can be concerned expert in AI technology. His knowledge can be sought for, and then of course there should be also provision made by the ethics committee, as recommended by the ethics committee, how these will be guarded so far as the patient's autonomy is concerned, patient's understanding, in the use of AI. AI can impact on all the stakeholders, whether it is the investigator, the study team members at the site, or whether it is at the level of the patient also. There might be in certain situations there you can use an AI technology or some digital solution where in order to get sufficient data inputs from the patient, you want your patient also to be supportive of it, and patient is also to a certain extent would be you can say that AI informed or AI should be comfortable to handle that technology and facilitate in data entry into the AI-based database. So for that matter, I think there is also a need for sensitizing the patients or the participants also how to use the technologies at their level. So at the present, it is a challenge definitely, but then there is a time, we are at a threshold, and it is time that we gradually try to sensitize all the stakeholders and incorporate the very idea and concept of integrating AI technologies into our clinical trial conduct. At the same time, we should also think of that there are certain challenges also, there are some risks also. There are issues like algorithm bias, there are issues like data privacy, and how are we going to guard against that? To a great extent, some of these issues has also been highlighted in the ICMR guidelines. I think the current GCP training programs, awareness and training programs, in which there is a lot of emphasis is given on ethics education by the ethics committee members. This portion is up till now not being deliberated, not being discussed. I think it now demands that we should also try to educate our ethics committee members also how they will be aware of the nitty-gritties of AI use in clinical trial conduct. Maybe slowly we are getting smarter, and I can only hope in another couple of years or maybe in a year or so, we will be in a much better position. So that at the moment that I can comment. So far as from Indian context, yes, if you intelligently use AI, yes, of course, the efficiency would be improved in all respects. So far as quality of data as well as the patient safety, the two major arms that are otherwise covered in the good clinical practice. So both will be strengthened if we can intelligently use AI. So that's what I can say. AI should rather use as an intelligent tool to be used judiciously, and we should not allow the AI to be a master on us. So it should be just a technology that should be used judiciously in order to handle the conduct the clinical trials in a much better and efficient manner. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir has emphasized how we should use this intelligence, artificial intelligence, intelligently. And I think he had also emphasized on this issue that when algorithms accelerate discovery, here we are talking about drug discovery, our ethics must not, rather, we should have more progression in ethics also. So ethics also should have a proper development, because AI-led drug development, the speed of science must never overturn the safety of patients. So this is very important for all of us. And now I want to ask Professor Santanu Tripathi, sir, the next question. No, please go to the previous slide. Hello. The last question I want to ask, can you reflect on a recent Indian case where pharmacovigilance failed and how clinical trial design could have preempted that? For an example, if we talk about the pioglitazone saga, once there was some black box warning, again, it was being withdrawn with a very short notice, again, we get back pioglitazone. This type of, or very recently, we have one drug known as lorcaserin, which was there for a long time. maybe 1 year or 1.5 years. Then when some data from US we got, and US FDA banned lorcaserin, after that it was being removed from India. So what is your take on that?
Yeah, we ourselves have given good 2 examples you have cited. Both of them are very good examples, critical examples for how the pharmacovigilance has failed. By the pharmacovigilance failure, we actually mean that there are risks which could have been mitigated, risks which could have been minimized, but because of the not so robust or not so good trial design, we missed that out, and thereby patient safety has been compromised. Yes, that happens, not too often, but that happens. So, and in the question itself, the answer is there. It is the clinical trial design to a great extent which can preempt and which can actually help us in reducing the probability, minimizing the probability of that eventuality of compromised patient safety, and more participants, they suffer from injuries which otherwise could have been avoided had there been a good monitoring, scope for monitoring, had there been a good risk-based or risk minimization strategy very clearly spelled out in the protocol. And also, of course, it is not enough to have that specified in the protocol. There should be also very meticulously also complied with. The protocol compliance should also take place. Another example I can mention, apart from the 2 examples that we have just identified, and that is about that itolizumab story. We all know about the itolizumab, which is a monoclonal antibody, which was actually introduced in India, approved in India for treatment of psoriasis, plaque psoriasis, chronic plaque psoriasis in 2013. But during the COVID time, when we were actually looking for any solution, particularly many of the COVID patients, they were dying because of the cytokine storm or cytokine release syndrome, as a result of which ARDS, and people are dying with ARDS. So we were frantically looking for a solution, and somebody came up with a solution, ready-made solution, handy solution that people are otherwise using off-label, using itolizumab for this purpose, and there were some examples, some good response, but then some sponsors, they came up and they thought of to have a quick trial, okay, whereby they tried to impress on the regulator, and then in fact itolizumab was tried for its efficacy in COVID-19 induced CRS, the cytokine release syndrome, and ARDS. And it was a phase 2 study that was planned. The sample size was only 30, and the patients were randomized 2:1. The 2 for the investigational drug, that is itolizumab, and one for the standard of care. And it was a controlled trial. The sample was only 30, and the study was conducted, and it was in July 2020. It was actually 20th July 2020 when it was approved, okay, under emergency use authorization. So, but then later on there was a lot of criticism that whether it was because there were the few areas where the criticism came up. The type of approval was, of course, emergency use authorization. We must understand that there was a huge need that time. The evidence base on which the approval was given, that was again, many people have questioned that, because it was phase 2 only, phase 3 was otherwise waived, and the sample size was quite low. And although we must remember that it was not an investigational new drug, it was a drug which was already licensed for some other indication, and it was repurposed for this purpose. And but then the time of approval was a time when there was a real unmet need, and based on that the regulator failed. Of course, there was subject expert committee who were also convinced, But then the objection was why there was no mandatory phase 4 trial, post-licensure phase 4 trial was asked. The clinical trial design was also criticized. It was not enough robust. And these are some of the reasons why. And people also said that the clinical trial design could have been a little more strengthened in terms of the so-called Simon's two-stage design. When within the same trial you ask for initial few patients, part of the sample size, in which they will do a rapid this thing, okay, part. And basically the whole trial will be split into two phases, two stages. The first stage is relatively smaller number of subjects where you try to see whether the optimum or desirable outcome is achieved. And if not, then don't go further. And if you get, then you go to the second stage, something like that. So it's a kind of a cautious stage, okay. But then, although truly speaking, Simon's two-stage design was not adopted, but then the DSMB in that trial asked for, recommended that the first 5 patients will be receiving itolizumab in a non-randomized fashion. Out of 30, first 5 patients will be getting that, and then after that you can go, if you are confident, then you can go to the next phase. So these are the areas where they had gone for this, and it was approved. And later on, there were also a good number of observational studies which have also been published, and the sponsor also claimed they had good sample size observational studies, also post-marketing observational studies, although it was not marketed for with this particular indication. So these were there. So at the hindsight, we can now criticize, but the situation was such that time that almost we were compared to, we were drastically, frantically trying to find a solution, and we thought it is a good solution. And many people also later on published their observations. Trials have been also conducted. They have shown. So this is one case you can say that where people have said, because in the same trial there were 3 dates also took place. And later on also, it was very difficult to identify whether the dates that had happened in such COVID patients, COVID-19 patients, whether the investigational product or that treatment product, whether that was the offending drug, etc., cause of the death. But then the safety of the product was not beyond question, because the quality of evidence was not very desirable. So people had questioned. The answer to this is only that the trial design has to be robust, the sample size should be adequate, and a proper risk management strategy is to be spelled out a priori, and that should also be clearly written in the protocol, and we have to take measures that is also complied with properly. So with this, I think yes, there is provision for this in the designing of the trial, where patient safety would be put at the foremost priority, and any compromise with patient safety is not to be accepted. Okay, it's not acceptable. So the message should go that way. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I think you had emphasized a very important point for all of us. Yes, every pharmacovigilance failure is a design flaw in disguise. If trials are not built to detect the right risk early, the system ends up learning the hard way at the patient's cost. And you had also emphasized regarding the accountability issues, how we should become more proactive, and how the ethics should have an innovative approach. I think we also got certain this type of controversial issues if we talk about pharmacovigilance in India and reflections on certain COVID vaccines. For an example, Covaxin, certain public media trials that had happened. So I think that also need to be avoided, and we should have, or rather than we can say, like when public trust hinges on scientific transparency, this pharmacovigilance is not just a back-end system, it is the front line of all ethical trial design. We need to explore it more. And as we have less time today, we have to move towards our next panelist. Please change the slide.
Dr. Shambo, just a word. Is there any other occasion I need to be present, or if you please pardon me?
If possible, if you can present at the end of our panel discussion, we will be grateful,
Okay.
sir.
I'll be there. I'll be there.
Okay, sir. So
Thank
please change the slide. Yeah, so we are really delighted to have with us Dr. Priyanka Bose Bhattacharya from Abbott Clinical Governance. So welcome, madam. I had a first question to you. As we are talking about global scrutiny on trial integrity, how do Indian arms of different multinational companies maintain the GCP compliance while working on resource-constrained trial sites?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shambo, and a happy International Clinical Trials Day to the delegates as well as the esteemed members of the panel. You're absolutely right, Shambo. There is an increased scrutiny on trial integrity. I mean, whether it's the US FDA, EMA, or even our own CDSCO office, there are more inspections that we are seeing. There are more, sudden ways that suddenly, be it at the site level or sponsor level, where the checks are being looked at. So I think for us as within an MNC, it's very important for us to maintain GCP compliance. We have to keep things in order in the house. And what I can say is that we are taking a three-pronged approach towards this. I mean, first of all, we have to do it at the site level, as you have very, highlighted that most of the sites that we sometimes work on, just depending on the therapy area that we are working on, that there can be resource constraint at these trial sites. So it's very important that we, work with the trial site in developing, the capabilities of it. So there are two things that we can do. First is, of course, build the capability of the site. This can be done through trainings, workshops, certifications, and it's something that should not be overlooked, because there are times when we have a principal investigator who's very well experienced and renowned, and but he or she may have a team that is not as experienced. So the importance of training initiatives is very important. You cannot do away with it. So that has to be a continuous approach that we take in terms of capability building. But on that note, I would also like to highlight, there is a evolution of our clinical trial sites in India. And this I speak from my own personal experience. I've seen that over the years, the sites are also investigating, the hospitals, the institutes are also investing a lot more in developing these clinical research departments within their institutes. And, these clinical research departments are very good to partner with. And because of that, one of the other approaches that an MNC is taking is that of a preferred partner. So what happens is we work with them, we do capability building. They are also, putting in the equal amount of effort in it. And then that becomes like a preferred partner for us to conduct our trials. Because when we are conducting global trials, the global team is one team that we have to handle, and then there is the local team that has to manage. So that is one aspect. The other thing we are doing is actually taking the risk-based monitoring approach. Because initially, I mean, many years ago when it was started, there was a bit of a resistance from the sites itself, because, the 100% source data verification was like the gold standard. So it was like, how can you not do a, monitoring visit at the site and expect the data to be of good quality? But over the years, there is not just acceptance at the site level, but also from the regulations point of view. I mean, even if you look at the recent ICH E6R3 GCP update, you will see that there is a big focus on quality, and I mean, it's at the core of it, and even risk-based monitoring is being really encouraged, and there are more guidelines and clarity on that. So that is another way we are, working with the sites, because what happens is that when you do a risk-based monitoring approach, it reduces the burden at the site, because they don't have to deal with these monitoring visits with 100% source data verification. The connectivity with the site, the centralized data collection, now that helps. in reducing the burden of the sites. Then at the sponsor level, we are looking at, we have to have a lot of self-inspection in place. And again, I've seen an evolution of in that field as well. I mean, in the past, I was in the operations role, and we used to have a quality person within the operations team. And that quality person used to conduct these self-inspections. But now, more and more, I see that there is a separate entity. I mean, I'm also an example of that we have a separate team that exclusively does this. And this is just to make sure that, we are maintaining high standards of compliance and quality. And those kind of self-inspections are done in a very, in a manner not to, keep an audit kind of a mindset, but to have a quality mindset where we want to keep things in order, be audit ready at any time, and do things the right way. Because this is a highly regulated industry, we can't afford to miss. And then finally, I think this is like the best aspect I've seen in the evolution of clinical research, is that we are also looking at this, from a patient level, at a patient level. So we, at MNCs, there is I mean, when we approach clinical trials, we are also looking to partner with the patient voice here. And we want to hear the patient voice while developing our trials. So we have started partnering with NGOs. And that, I think, is very important because at a personal level, I feel that, this was the missing piece in clinical research, say 15, 20 years ago, where the patient voice was not being heard. And now that we are more and more looking into that, I think that is where we are very, it's very important that you give the right education, the consent is taken properly. And that is an aspect of compliance that is under a lot of scrutiny. But if it is done with the right intent, with the right partners, I think we are able to keep things in order very well. So that's what, I mean, in terms of, managing the kind of scrutiny that we get, we have to be, taking care of all aspects of the clinical trial that we are conducting.
Thank you. Thank you, madam. I think we need to acknowledge that good clinical practice is not just a checklist, it is a culture. And India's resource constrained sites, I think multinational companies must shift from compliance enforcement to capacity building, because quality can't be outsourced. It must be owned. So I think that should be one of the very important approach for our all MNCs. Now coming to the second question, madam. How is risk-based monitoring being adapted to India's heterogeneous trial ecosystem? What is your experience?
Yeah. That is again very true. I mean, risk-based monitoring. So you know what? On one hand, we are the most populous nation. We have immense potential in terms of healthcare qualified investigators as well as patients in need. But at the same time, we are also very advanced digitally as a nation. And that is the technology which is coming to the sites as well. And this risk-based monitoring approach is gaining more and more precedence because the sites are ready and it's turning into the new norm of how to conduct monitoring. And it has its advantages. Truth be told, it is a more cost-effective way of looking at the data. And at the same time, we are doing a sort of course correction and picking up the mistakes while we are working on the trial. It is not practically or financially practical to be able to come towards the end of the trial and then realize that there were too many dropouts in your patient population, or that the data that you have picked up is not adequate to come to a proper conclusion. So with those kind of thought processes, risk-based monitoring is really gaining precedence. And also now there is always, there is an evolution also of the regulation. So there is more clarity coming from the regulators. There is more acceptability of this data from the regulators as well. So how we are approaching it is, honestly speaking, the basics of risk-based monitoring remains the same. You have critical data points that you identify, or you look at high-risk sites and you take that up. Now, as you mentioned, India has a very heterogeneous trial ecosystem. And honestly, our sites change with the therapy area we are looking at. And you see a growing trend of researchers moving from the big cities towards tier 2 cities, and also everything has to be taken into account, has to be accounted for while planning this. So the two things that MNCs are doing is that, first of all, they're selecting the right CRO or the partner to conduct it, because this piece of monitoring is usually outsourced. And every CRO, especially the MNC ones, have a lot of capability, but you have to select the right CRO for the right type of trial. Because, you know, they may have centralized monitoring, which may be perfect if it's a global trial where all the data gets pulled in, or it might be something, if it's a very unique therapy area or an indication, then you may need to have more better robust data in terms of the critical data points. And the second thing that is very important while designing a risk-based monitoring plan is that you have the right data to design your plan. And for that, companies are investing, both companies and researchers are investing a lot on collating data, like creating new dashboards, creating looking at linkages, looking at how one data point may lead to another. That kind of information is very important to look at the risk-based monitoring aspects of it. So what I would like to say is that while India has a heterogeneous ecosystem in terms of capabilities, if you choose the right CRO, then they will be able to come up with a plan that provides the right kind of data points to do that monitoring. And if you have the right kind of data set available internally, then that makes it very easy for you to identify the critical data points in terms of your endpoints or in terms of the site risk involved, and accordingly you design it and have a at the end the outcome is to have very good quality data so that we can come up with really adaptable and applicable data, insights to the drug in question or the device in question.
Thank you, madam. So what I think that risk-based monitoring, it is not about watching less, it is about watching smarter.
Correct.
And India's diverse trial setting, where we are talking about heterogeneity, it is the algorithm that needs local context, not just global calibration. So again, want to thank you, Dr. Priyanka Bhattacharya, for your wonderful insights. And now may I ask, please change the slide. Slide change, please. I think we have the next question for Dr. Anirban Rai Chaudhuri, who is the head of development excellence in Sun Pharma. So welcome, sir. My first question to you, in competitive generic and specialty space, how Indian company manage trial innovation without compromising on timelines or ethics? What is your take?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for having me here. Just confirm that I'm audible because I'm speaking for the first time. So just
yes, you are audible.
Great. So yeah, firstly, I'm not talking here on behalf of Sun Pharma. I mean, I'm talking on behalf of I have worked for multiple companies. I'm kind of going to share my collective experience across last 25, 26 years that I've been doing clinical trials. And the advantage and disadvantage of being the last speaker of the group is that I think everything has been spoken. So when you talk of actually innovation, now innovation is not just about AI. I mean, AI is one part of innovation, but so I'm going to talk of TI, that is, true innovation. That is, or in other words, it's frugal innovation. So can you, when you are doing a clinical trial, can you innovate in a way so that finally what do you want? Do you want the drug to come to the market faster and you have the right data in terms of its efficacy and safety? So how we can actually kind of start from the beginning of when we are actually thinking about the trial, and that is what is all about innovation. Now technology comes in between bits and pieces, but I think what you call as true innovation comes from the human mind, and that is where I think the strategy is important. And so when we start with a clinical trial, I think one of the thing is today, most of the, I think we all kind of keep talking about clinical trials are getting complex. Who is making it complex? We are making it complex. Why? If you look at, there is one primary objective, two secondary objective, and there are 8 exploratory objectives. Because one clinical trial, first of all, you try to get a lot of answers, but that actually makes the trial more complex. That actually, you know, if we can simplify that, that actually can reduce your timeline, that actually can reduce your error, that actually can make the quality better. So I think that is one important, I mean, which I personally believe that trial should be as simple as possible, because with so many exploratory objectives also, the burden on the patient or the participant also increases extremely high, right? So, you know, Santosh spoke about these e-pros and stuff. Like, you know, we feel the e-pros actually make things easy, but for a patient also, it's quite a burden. I mean, some cases it happens that patient has to go for 8 to 10 different, different questionnaires they have to fill, and that's something again leads to complexity in the clinical trial. So one part is the trial design. Now another, and in this context, again, you know, the various innovative designs like an adaptive design, basket design, this work really well. And I'll tell you, like, you know, this is working extremely well with all other regulators, but unfortunately this doesn't work. If we are talking from Indian context, it doesn't work. We have tried in multiple other, you know, organization. I mean, if you present our adaptive design, it gets accepted, but ACC says that, you know, before you get to the next dose, you come and present. So that actually defeats the purpose of an adaptive design. So yeah, so that regulatory, you know, hurdle is there. But if I look at from a global perspective, adaptive design and other innovative designs really help in expediting the timeline for clinical trials. Then comes the regulatory pathway. Again, that is where also we can decide multiple ways, right? And if it is a 52 weeks trial, we can always negotiate with the regulatory agency that for the primary submission, we will use the 26 weeks data. I mean, this case by case basis. And then the supplemental data will be the 52 weeks data. So you actually get the trial in the market probably or possibly 6 months in advance. But then that needs to be properly defined. Your endpoint has to be properly defined and then negotiated whether 26 weeks works or not. I mean, for like in a simple spell like a diabetes, it can probably work. And in certain many other cases, actually, it works really well. Then comes, as we continue through the, I think Dr. Tripathi also mentioned, through the life cycle of the study. Again, it also links back to some extent risk-based monitoring, but what we do, you know, it's about, you know, continuous data evaluation, right? You know, say whatever data we decide, like, you know, a section of the data every month, or it can be every 2 months, depending on the study design, that we continue to review the safety parameters, the critical, the critical, data points, the safety data points, the efficacy data points, and that is where technology helps. I mean, you don't need very high-end risk-based monitoring tool. Even Power BI throws out fantastic analytics based on which, you know, your clinicians, statisticians, and the data management team actually can identify, you know, trends, and based on which either, you know, that can actually lead to what we call as on-site monitoring, or actually if there are any data issues that can be actually, you know, resolved through data queries also. So various ways this can be done. Similarly, like, you know, when you go to the next stages of, I mean, for the CSR writing, again, there are a lot of tools which are coming, but most of the tools are not probably foolproof. But you can actually start writing the protocol, the CSR in advance. You don't need to wait for your top line to come. I mean, even part of the work can also be done. So if you, in summary, if you really plan well, and that is what I call innovate within your framework, and try to make sure you optimize every single step so that you can get the trial faster and more importantly get the product faster in the market without even losing any insight on the on the data quality. So I'll stop there. You're muted, I think so.
So if you just touch upon about some generic space, how you are actually approaching.
So what do you mean by generic space?
When we talk about different, that the generic drugs you are marketing in different parts of the world. So in that, how you are using this type of innovation skills?
Yes. So again, it's the same thing. See, whether you are doing a study with a generics medicine or it's a study with a innovative medicine, the study principles remain the same, the rigor remains the same. And a particular product, and in fact, something is going on right now in Japan, which is actually generics in the US, is actually a new drug in Japan. So, or it may be a new drug in Russia. And in fact, we are doing a study with Japan and Russia, where both the countries is considered new drug, but is actually a generics molecule. So again, we don't really differentiate between a generics and an innovator. While I personally work only on the innovator space, but as far as the standards are concerned, is the same standard and same processes are followed.
That's great. I think there are certain controversies regarding the generic manufacturing, especially there are certain group of drugs where we can waive the bioavailability, bioequivalent studies in India, but not in US. So you had clearly mentioned that you are following one rule that applicable for all the different countries.
As far as the rule, basically following the rules of the country, for the registration rules of the country, the drug goes through that kind of a clinical trial.
Right. So what we can conclude from here, that in India's high-speed generic race, because we are now wanting to become the pharmacy capital of world, true innovation is not just about beating the clock. It is about bending the curve without breaking the code of ethics. I think now we are moving towards the next and final.
And to your point, from when you talk about pharmacy of the world, it is, I think, that if you look at the viewpoint of the Indian government and coming with Vikshit Bharat concept, they also Indian government is also pushing Indian companies to move into innovation while keeping focus on the generics, but also look into innovative space, and that is where I think most of the other Indian companies are also moving. And you know about this enmetazobactam, which is the first beta-lactamase inhibitors after so many years, which actually came out of the Indian market, and Sridhar Narayan was one of the co-inventors. He was from Bugworks, but I think this drug came from Orchid or one of the companies. But this is the first NCE to be registered by US FDA. So this innovation is happening at the Indian manufacturers' perspective also.
Yeah, so we are proud of our Indian innovations, and I think ICMR also has launched that nafithromycin, and very recently that was again an indigenous product. So now may I ask you, this could be very much useful for our postgraduate students and those who are aspiring to prepare trial protocols. So can you share a case where a trial protocol had to be restructured due to some participant non-compliance or dropout, and what operational changes were adopted?
Okay, so yeah, I'll give you two examples. One from kind of current and one probably from the past, and one operational and one kind of from a study design perspective. So so there is one study on acne with anti-androgenic agent where this is actually for the study for Japan market, and since vitamin D has an effect on androgen level. So PMDA actually asked for a particular vitamin D level from the as an inclusion criteria. I'm not getting the details of it, but there is a specific, levels there. But when we started the study, we realized that, there is a 80% screen failure because of the vitamin D level. And when it had to actually go to PMDA, and we had to negotiate with on that criteria. So we had to renegotiate on a particular level, which is lower than what they had actually thing. So we basically kind of had to get into like what would be upper level, what is the lower. So it went to a limit rather than a specific cutoff. That actually reduced the screen failure from 80% to 20%. You still have screen failure, but 20% is still manageable as compared to 80%. So we actually had to make an amendment into the inclusion criteria to get more patients into the study. From an operational perspective, this was like, years back we were doing a prostate cancer study with leuprolide, and that is when, so as per design, the patient actually has to come every week, and that is one of the requirements from US FDA, that you have to come every week for PSA and the testosterone level, and to make to see when exactly the patient is reaching the castration level. So for a prostate cancer patient, it was actually getting very difficult to follow up every week, and that's actually a lot of burden for the patient. If you look at like 3 cycles, like the 3 months, then it becomes like it becomes like a huge number of visits. So what we did not change any design as such, but we made like, for the visit 1 and visit 4, patient needs to come to the hospital, but visit 2 and visit 3, a phlebotomist with a nurse goes to the patient's house. And again, this is what I call as decentralized clinical trial. You don't need high-end tools or anything. You go to the patient's house and you collect the blood, you do the vitals, and you bring it to the site. And that is when it not only helped in actually reducing the patient dropouts, but at the same time it actually increased the area of of our thing, and especially some of the areas like in UP, even like within just of 80-90 kilometers, patients were actually started participating in that helped in recruitment as well. So this is another example I could give. You're muted, Shambo.
I think these 2 examples are really helpful for those who are listening. And I think I want to summarize here like that. When trial designs clash with patient realities,
yes,
dropouts are not data loss. They are feedback, right?
Yes.
And the smart pharma listens, adapts, and redesigns with people.
Yeah.
Not just protocols, but also in mind. So thank you again. You have your comments actually had encouraged.
I want to give one more example. Okay, so
Sure,
I'll take a couple of more minutes. So I also participated as a trial participant in the Sputnik V phase 3 study.
Okay.
So it was initially for 6 months, and then they increased the thing because they wanted to see the immunogenicity level, like up to 9 months. So there was a protocol amendment, and they were like, can you come over? I said that, that is the time of basically the second wave of COVID 2022. And he said that we're very scared. We were very scared to even go out of the house. He said that, okay, if somebody can actually come home and take the blood sample, then I am more comfortable and I can sign the informed consent form. So that when they decided, they said that yes, somebody can actually come home and take your blood sample. It's about just taking a blood sample. And that actually, because of that, actually, I signed the informed consent for the extension of the study. And this is my personal experience as a participant of a phase 3 clinical trial.
Great. I think these examples are really mind-blowing. I think it will be very much helpful for our research parties, the those who are participants today. Please move forward to the next slide. Next slide, please. Can you hear us, Team Planet? Can you move towards the next slide? I think we, due to there is some issue with Professor Santanu Kumar Tripathi, sir, and I will not get him as this for this particular question. Again, I am requesting Team Planet, please do the slide changing. As previously we had a discussion with Dr. Somnath Basu, who is a regulatory person. Unfortunately, due to some issues, he had not joined today. And he had mentioned one thing. Yeah, please hold on. Please hold on. He had sent me one message so that I can read out for all of you. Basically, what I felt during my stay in CDSCO headquarters, the hurdles and hesitation with fear of problems in the mind of investigating doctors or researchers need to be eradicated. There are a lot of prospective advancement in doing clinical trial, especially those which are sponsored by the big companies and being conducted as global arm in India. This he had sent me as message. Yes, we need to celebrate this day of International Clinical Trial Day for that historical scurvy trial by Dr. James Surgeon, the Scottish naval surgeon, James Lynn. As we had mentioned, one important issue he had mentioned that documentation is the key element. And I think we all should be agreed upon that. Documentation is one of the very key elements for all of us who are doing clinical trial. Next slide, please. So as some issues happened with Professor Santanu Kumar Tripathi, we are not getting him. So we are also moving towards the end of the panel discussion. Can you please change the slide, please? Team Clarinet, can you please change the slide? Hello, yeah. So what are the key takeaways from this panel discussion? Number one, we had discussed about innovation. So artificial intelligence driven trial optimization and decentralized trial models, they are actually reshaping clinical trial operations. And we also learned how the real world data is bridging the regulatory gaps and enabling rapid evidence generation. Next, please. So we also learn about inclusivity, focus on underrepresented groups. We had discussed about elderly population, tribal population, rural population, and these are crucial for ethical generalizability. We talk about justice, and when we talk about inclusion criteria, they need to evolve based on population health realities. Next, please. When we talk about ethics and regulation, important concepts are coming up: proxy consent, digital risk assessment, and trial explainability. These are the emerging ethical frontiers. And when we talk about CRO registration reforms, we don't have much discussion on that perspective. We will have a future discussion on that. But we had a good conversation with Dr. Priyanka Bhattacharya regarding this risk-based monitoring demand and which agile compliance frameworks. Next slide, please. Can you please change the slide? We also try to develop certain strategic recommendation. Number one, how to build trial-ready ecosystems. regional research hubs, ethics committee training, data infrastructure, and patient engagement models. Then how to harmonize different digital innovation and regulation, how we should have a collaborative framework between CDSCO, ICMR, and industry to guide artificial intelligence or real world studies which can be used in trials. So registries. Next slide, please. So next, we also try to understand. Next slide, please. The importance of ethics committee empowerment. How we can introduce different evaluations tools which should be standardized one for digital, decentralized, and community-based research. And finally, how to ensure the inclusive protocol design. This should be mandatory. We need to think about that. Mandatory representation benchmarks in publicly funded trials. For an example, it should cover age, gender, location, etc. Next. So these are few important focus area. Future, we need to focus on capacity building, upskilling the clinical and regulatory workforce in digital trials, artificial intelligence, and data ethics. Then how to ensure transparency and trust, how to promote open access trial registries, participant feedback loops, and post-trial disclosure. Then number 3, we need to promote the public health alignment, how we can align mega trial priorities with India's non-communicable disease and also infectious disease burden. And finally, the global collaboration. So position India as a hub for ethically robust, globally impactful clinical research. So these are few important road ahead for us. Next slide, please. So call to action, we must do research with the pupil, not on the pupil. Let's commit to future where clinical trials are number 1, innovative, but never at the cost of safety, inclusive, yet scientifically rigorous, and ethical in spirit and not just in paperwork. Next. Next slide. There are certain technical glitch as we were talking much on ethics and AI. I think both of these had some problem with our. Can you please move towards the next slide, please? Yeah, thank you. So what should be our role as clinicians, regulators, researchers, and sponsors? Drive a cultural shift in how we design, conduct, and communicate clinical research. Next. So this is a very important message for all of us. This had been taken from Mahabharata, when Yudhishthir asked Vidura, how I can be a moral king. So our research should be moral one, and how we should ensure our research moral. I think this message from Vidura to Yudhishthir is very true for all of us. That is, Atmana Pratikulani Pareshuna Samachare. Do unto others what you would like others to do unto you. So as a researcher, we need to think when we are taking our patient into our clinical trial ecosystem, we need to sit in the patient's or participant's chair first, and then we need to decide whether we should go or no go with that participants. Next. Next slide, please. I think that was the last slide. And when we talk about Bharat here, I just taken this abbreviation, bridging human, animal, and environmental health through ethical research innovation. India is today telling about one health and one world. So it could be our pillars, that Bharat framework. Number one, the One Health surveillance. We had talked about zoonotic disease, antimicrobial resistance, pandemics. Then how our ecosystem will become ethical, how we should maintain the research transparency and community trust. Then global equity, the access to innovation for all, that is also important, and digital health and artificial intelligence we were talking about. So one world, one health, and one future, that is our goal. We need to empower our country, our Bharat, to lead the way in responsible health innovation, not just for our country only, but for the entire planet. So I think we had a very good discussion today in this panel discussion. I am really thankful to all the panelists for giving their valuable time and inputs. Thank you all. If someone has, our panelists have any final comment, may I request to unmute themselves and please tell us. Please stop the screen sharing. Screen sharing, please stop here. Any comments from your side? So, madam.
I just wanted to actually emphasize on the fact that ethics committee training would be required to a great extent if it has to face this AI era. That's at utmost, because one of the pillars for protection of the participants is ethics committee review process. The other one is informed consent, which has been addressed in many ways in all these guidelines and policy matters that have come out of India. Abroad also it is there, but we are talking of India right now. So from that point of view, informed consent, ethics committee training are most important. And the others actually will fall in place, from the scientific point of view, algorithms, on which basis it should be, what population it should be, how many diverse population it should consider, gender, ethnicity, religion, everything. That is all on the scientific side. But from the protection of participants side, I would emphasize on these two aspects. And also get the informed consent of the patient and or the participant. In everything, this has been actually emphasized, even when sharing the data. All these instances, you require the patient to give the informed consent.
Thank you, madam. Any final comments from Dr. Taur, Dr. Bhattacharya, Dr. Anirban Rai Chaudhary?
So I think, thanks, Shambo. Very insightful discussion. What I would say is that we have to emphasize more on education. And it's not only patients. I think we as clinical research professionals, each one of us, every stakeholder who is involved in this journey needs to be trained, retrained till we achieve the success of all the clinical principles. I think that's gonna be the success mantra for all this, because it is an ever evolving landscape. We cannot just rest with our knowledge, which is so dynamic. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Taur. So Any comment from Dr. Bhattacharya and Dr. Aishwadri? Okay. So we are ending to today's program. We had celebrated the International Clinical Trials Day. We are really thankful to all the faculties who were there today since afternoon, and on behalf of Physician Research Foundation West Bengal branch, under the aegis of Association of Physicians of India, West Bengal, and our co-organizers, Indian Pharmacological Society, Forum of Ethics Review Committee of India, FERCI, and Association of Clinical Pharmacologists. I want to thank all the delegates who were there since 2 p.m. and it is almost, we are approaching towards 8 p.m. now. So really thankful to all of them. Now almost we can see more than 300 participants are there. So we are really overwhelmed with your responses and hope we will organize more scientific sessions like this. And we are really thankful to all the faculties who were there today. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, 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 bye.
So thank you so much everyone for giving us the opportunity to host this session. Good night to all of you.